Hello, John. Why can't I see you?
Now you can.
Oh, there you are.
I'm just trying to get set up here, Sue. How are
Oh,
you?
okay, I'm fine, thank you. How are you?
Good. Did I see the weather right? You guys are getting slammed with some bad weather?
Well, right at the moment, it's nothing's happening. Supposedly, what has happened for Boston is the first storm we were too far south, and the second storm we were too far north, and nobody knows exactly where this one is going to hit. So. Your guess is as good as mine. I have no plans till Christmas Day, so I can stay inside.
Yeah, isn't that wonderful?
Yep. What are
The
you doing for the holidays?
We're staying home. We're not traveling. Marion and I are going to have a nice, quiet Christmas, and we've got friends that have moved here from Illinois that are our neighbors, and we're going to go to a brunch with them, and that's pretty much it.
Oh, well, that sounds like a lovely day.
Yeah. How about you?
Well, one of my daughter's friends, who is of Italian descent,
Oh,
we have to go to their house and make ravioli for dinner.
oh my goodness.
Yes.
Homemade raviolis?
Yep.
Whoa,
Yeah,
that's
and
a
there'll be
treat,
lots of
Sue.
other things too, but that's the major plan.
Well, there's
Yeah, we've
nothing
we've
better
I
than
think
good
they've been
homemade
doing it.
raviolis.
My daughter and her friend have been doing it for years. Obviously, this is only, I guess, the fourth year that I've done it with them.
Uh-huh.
So that's what we're doing.
Well, I'll tell you what, that's a treat of it's almost like, down here with all the Hispanic people from Mexico.
Right.
And I mean, we have Hispanics from Cuba, from Venezuela, from Colombia. This is just a large Hispanic
What did they
colony
come to do?
to work and to live. And they like the climate. They like the fact that Spanish is so frequently spoken.
Right.
And all of our doctors are basically Hispanic.
Bilingual for sure.
Bilingual, yeah, everybody is bilingual.
Are
I
you?
used to be I used to be bilingual when I was working, but that's like anything else. It kind of
If you
slips through
don't
the
use it,
cracks.
it goes.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, it's one of those kind of things, but it's a delightful area to live in. It reminds me of growing up in California in the 1950s.
Good
Um,
for you.
We love it down here. And of course, everybody always mentions the border, but the border is really not an issue where we live because we have so many federal agencies and armed federal people from every branch of the government. If somebody's an illegal or somebody's got problems with the law, they're headed out of here.
Okay. How far are you from the border?
8 miles north of the border.
Oh, okay. That's very close.
It is very close, yes. And of course, we're well aware of all of the unfortunate things that take place in the northern provinces. The cartels control everything. And unfortunately, over the COVID period, the cartels got even a bigger grip into the United States.
Oh, I'm sure that's true.
And it's they're brutal, and when you talk about Tren de Agua and some of these other groups, the Mexican cartels are equally brutal. And I most of my career, Sue, I've traveled all over Mexico. It's a delightful country, beautiful people, hardworking people, and
And very beautiful country.
a beautiful country, yes. Have you been to Mexico then?
I have been, yes, several
Oh, yeah.
times.
Anyway, it's just a shame that everybody's got to be looking over their shoulder because they never know what's going to happen.
That's true.
Yeah, and one of the things that I share with people, I don't know if you remember the name Vicente Fox, but he was a president of Mexico for about 6 years. And I knew him personally when he was a governor of the state of Guanajuato. We were going to build a plant down there, and got to know him quite well. And they always told me that they were very concerned about the drugs and the cartels, that enough would fall off the truck that it would hurt their well-being as well. And
Right.
boy, he was
Absolutely.
really he called that one perfectly.
Hello, Fred.
Hey,
Hello,
Sue.
Fred.
Hey, John. Who, who is iPhone?
What's that? Oh, I
We
don't
have,
know. Maybe
It's
it's Chris or
Michael.
Rachel.
okay. Okay.
It's
Uh,
Where do you think, I thought Rachel said she was going to be back with us.
yeah. I guess maybe not till January, when she
Oh,
finally that course ends. So, um, okay. So I think we can start
it's
though.
it's Michael.
Oh, hi, Michael. Okay.
Hi.
Okay. Where we left off last time, we were in chapter 44. And this is kind of the emotional high point of the Joseph story. His brothers have brought Benjamin down with them. They buy the food. They're on their way home. But Joseph has had his servants put a silver cup in Benjamin's sack, and his servants catch up with him on the road, accuse Benjamin of stealing, and bring them all back to Joseph. And Joseph tells them that this man is a thief. He stays with me permanently as my servant. The rest of you can go back. And after arguing with their father, who doesn't want to let Benjamin go because he's so frightened he's going to lose the last child he has, from Rachel. Now that's exactly what's staring them in the face. They're going to have to go back without Benjamin. And so this is where Judah steps up and it makes, probably one of the most famous speeches in the Bible. He's the one who takes the leadership now, and it starts with chapter 45. The
45.
first chapter 45, yeah.
Okay.
The first Oh no, no, wait a minute. I'm sorry, no, it's 44, verse 18. Yeah, I was looking at the wrong page. Chapter 44, verse 18, through the end of the chapter.
Okay.
John, you want to read that?
Sure.
Okay.
Then Judah went up to him and said, "O my Lord, please let your servant speak a word in my Lord's ears, and let your anger burn against your servant, for you are like Pharaoh himself. My Lord asked his servants, saying, Have you a father or a brother? And we said to my Lord, We have a father, an old man, and a young brother, the child of his old age. His brother is dead, and he alone is left of his mother's children, and his father loves him. Then you said to your servants, Bring him down to me, that I may set my eyes on him. We said to my Lord, The boy cannot leave his father, for if he should leave his father would die. Then you said to your servants, Unless your youngest brother comes down with you, you shall not see my face again. When we went back to your servant, my father, we told him the words of my Lord. And when our father said, Go again, buy us a little food, we said, We cannot go down if our youngest brother goes with us. Then we will go down, for we cannot see the man's face unless our youngest brother is with us. Then your servant, my father, said to us, you shall know that my wife bore me 2 sons. One left me, and I said, surely he has been torn to pieces, and I have never seen him since. If you take this one also from me, and harm happens to him, you will bring down my gray hairs in evil to Sheol. Now, therefore, as soon as I come to your servant my father, and the boy is not with us, then as his life is bound up in the boy's life, as soon as he sees that the boy is not with us, he will die. And your servants will bring down the gray hairs of your servant our father with sorrow to Sheol. For your servant became a pledge of safety for the boy of my father, saying, if I do not bring him back to you, then I shall bear the blame before my father all my life. Now, therefore, please let your servant remain. Instead of the boy as a servant to my lord, let the boy go back with his brothers. For how can I go back to my father if the boy is not with me? I fear to see the evil that would find my father.
And so this finally is what gets to Joseph.
Yeah.
It really, it hits just the right chord with him, and he can't keep up his game anymore after that with the brothers.
Yeah.
And of course, this also cements Judah's status. He's clearly the leader of the brothers now. Just as the tribe of Judah will have the house of David and become the leading tribe, the royal house of Israel. In fact, what some modern scholars really wondered, maybe this story was written by some ambitious scribe in the court of King David or King Solomon, telling him how great their glorious ancestor Judah was. Okay, kind of way to
Oh,
win the favor of the king. But at this point again, Joseph, that then it gets too emotional. He can't keep up this cat and mouse game anymore with his brothers, and he finally reveals himself, and that starts off with
well, at this
yeah,
point, he has not revealed himself. And
no,
this
he hasn't.
this is
No,
a game they're playing back and forth. Am I reading or
yeah,
interpreting
I
what
mean,
you're saying?
in a sense, I mean, really, he's torturing his brothers. You can
Yeah.
almost, yeah, I mean, you can almost look at this as his revenge for what they did to him. Selling him into slavery, almost killing him. He's putting him through all this misery. He's sort of getting his revenge. But now with the speech of Judah, and the thought of his father, who he hasn't seen in probably at least 20 years, he finally breaks down. He can't keep this up anymore. And then this is when he reveals himself. And of course, that starts with chapter 45,
Right.
and it's 1 through 15. Sue, if you want
Want
to
me
read
to
that.
read?
Yeah,
Joseph
1
could
through
no
15.
longer control himself before all his attendants, and he cried out, have everyone withdraw from me. So there was no one else about when Joseph made himself known to his brothers. His sobs were so loud that the Egyptians could hear, and so the news reached Pharaoh's palace. Joseph said to his brothers, I am Joseph. Is my father still well? But the brothers could not answer him, so dumbfounded were they on account of him. Then Joseph said to his brothers, come forward to me. And when they came forward, he said, I am your brother Joseph, he whom you sold into Egypt. Now do not distress or reproach yourself because you sold me hither. It was to save life that God sent me ahead of you. It is now 2 years that there has been famine in the land, and there are 5 years to come in which there shall be no yield from the tilling. God has sent me ahead of you to ensure your survival on earth and to save your lives in an extraordinary deliverance. So it is not you who sent me here, but God, and he has made me a father to the Pharaoh, lord of his household, and ruler over the whole land of Egypt. Now hurry back to my father and say to him, thus say your son Joseph, God has made me Lord of all Egypt. Come down to me without delay, and you will dwell in the region of Goshen, where you will be near me, you and your children and your grandchildren, and all your flocks and herds, and all that is yours. Therefore, I will provide for you, for there are yet 5 more years of famine to come, that you and your household and all that is yours may not suffer. If you can see for yourself that my brother Benjamin himself, that is indeed who I am speaking to you. And you must tell my father everything about my high station in Egypt and all that you have seen, and bring my father here to me with all speed.
Yeah. So here he reveals himself, and again, he basically what he tells them is, for whatever reason that you did it to me, send me to slavery, you were really working out God's will. Basically, this was all foreseen by God. If I had not come down to Egypt, you would be all starving to death. But this is the working out of God's will. So, don't feel any more guilt or any more anger about this. It's all working out for the best is what he's really saying. And it's interesting it's verse 4 where Joseph says to his brothers, come near to me. They came near and he said, I am Joseph, your brother. In 1960, when the Catholic Church convened the Vatican II Church Council, that's when Pope John the 23rd called that council. And he called a meeting with the members, leaders of the Jewish community of Rome, plus Jewish delegates who he had invited to the conference. And when he was multilingual, like a lot of the popes are, he knew Hebrew. And when he walked into the room, to greet the Jewish leaders who were there, what he said
Mm.
was, in Hebrew, Ani Yosef Achechem, I am Joseph, your brother. And as
Mhm.
it turned out, that was actually his name. His given name before he became Pope was Angelo Joseph Roncalli.
Ah,
So he really was Joseph. And he quoted this verse to them when he came in the room.
wow.
Must have been very emotional.
It was, yeah. Yeah, Abraham Joshua Heschel, the Jewish theologian,
Right.
was one of the American Jewish delegates to that conference, and he later wrote about that, that scene with the Pope when he greeted them that way. Yeah,
That's amazing.
yeah,
The- We were in the Egyptian Museum in Turin, Italy, which is supposed to be one of the best Egyptian museums outside of Egypt. And there was so much history in there, and Marion and I tried to find an area where maybe there was some reference to this, but we didn't see anything in any reference to it. So, maybe it's this hidden in the archives, but certainly there ought to be a
could be, yeah.
reference to this because of Joseph's position with the Pharaoh.
Yeah. Well, the whole argument, about how much of the early books of the Bible are myth and how much are fact. A lot of people attack it by saying, the Egyptians were master record keepers. I mean, they
Yes,
had miles of
and that
hieroglyphics.
was
They
my
recorded
that
everything that happened. So how can something like the Exodus from Egypt happen and there's no record
no
of it at
record
all?
of it. Yes.
Yeah,
And that's what Marion and I kept talking about when we were in this museum,
yeah.
is that it was like 5 stories high and was a
Mhm.
huge facility. And you would think in all of these biblical areas that really Egypt played a big role in, that
Right.
there would be some reference to it, but we didn't see it anywhere in the
Yeah.
museum.
Yeah, one of the counter arguments that's brought up is, well, the Egyptians didn't record it because it was a national humiliation for them. I mean, here, their pharaoh is being looked as an evil person. They're slave owners who are abusing the Hebrews. The God of the Hebrews rains all these plagues down on Egypt. Pharaoh's armies drowned in the sea and destroyed. and the theory is that they didn't want to remember that. They just decided just to blot that out of their history. It was just too
Hmm.
big humiliation for them.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, again, it's a good point though. And then starting with chapter 16, with verse 16 rather there, you have Pharaoh's response. When Pharaoh finds out what's happened, and that starts with verse 16. And
You want me to keep reading?
well, no, I thought maybe Michael might want to might
Oh,
take the rest of that. Mike, you want to read from verse 16? Whoops, I
he's
think he's
muted.
muted. Yeah, can you hear me? Hmm. Okay. Um, well, you can go. Why don't you continue then, Sue?
With that, he embraced his brother Benjamin around the neck and wept, and Benjamin wept on his neck. He kissed all his brothers and wept upon them. Only then were his brothers able to talk to him. The news reached Pharaoh's palace. Joseph's brothers have come. Pharaoh and his couriers were pleased, and Pharaoh said to Joseph, say to your brothers, do as follows, load up your beasts and go at once to the land of Canaan. Take your father and your households and come to me, and I will give you the best of the land of Egypt, and you shall live off the fat of the land. And you are forbidden and you are forbidden. Do as follows: take from the land of Egypt wagons for your children and your wives, and bring your father here, and never mind your belongings, for the best of the land of Egypt shall be yours. The sons of Israel did so. Joseph gave them wagons as Pharaoh had commanded and supplied them with provisions for the journey. To each of them, moreover, he gave a change of clothing, but to Benjamin he gave 300 pieces of silver and several changes of clothing. And to the father he sent the following: 10 he asses laden with the best things of Egypt, and 10 she asses laden with grain, bread, and provisions for his father. As he sent his brothers off on his way, he told them, do not be quarrelsome on the way. Then they went up from Egypt and came to their father Jacob in the land of Canaan, and they told him, Jacob is still alive. Yes, he is ruler over the whole land of Egypt. His heart went numb, for he did not believe them. But when they recounted all that Joseph had said to them, and when he saw the wagons that Joseph had sent to transport him, the spirit of their father Jacob revised. Enough, said Israel, my son Jacob is alive, and I must go see him before I die.
For one of the verses, I think it's kind of interesting, is that verse 24, where he says he sent his brethren away and they departed. And he said to them, don't be quarrelsome by the way. I think, I think what he's worried about is that they're going to start blaming each other now.
Yeah.
If they say,
Ah, okay.
yeah,
Yeah.
if you hadn't wanted to kill him, all this wouldn't have happened. I tried to save
If
him,
you
and
wouldn't have thrown him in the ditch.
you can see them fighting among themselves. Whose fault really is it now that this happened to
Mhm.
Joseph? So I think he's anticipating that.
Yeah.
And then Jacob's journey down into Egypt. Michael, can you hear me? No, I guess not. Okay. Um, there's a couple of interesting verses there, and starting with chapter 46. Israel took his journey with all that he had and came to Beersheba, which is right on the edge of the Sinai Desert, starting to go down to Egypt, and offered sacrifices unto the God of his father Isaac. And God spoke to Israel in visions of the night, saying, Jacob, Jacob. And he said, here am I. Which is kind of odd. You remember we had the story when Jacob wrestled with the angel, and the angel says, your name shall no longer be called Jacob. From now
But
on, you're Israel.
yeah.
But whoever wrote the rest of the text doesn't seem to have gotten the message. They just flip back and forth. And here he's called Jacob and Israel in the same sentence, basically. Um, one theory is, that after his fight with the angel, this is when he really matures and becomes a better person. And some critics have said, well, maybe the fact that they're still using both his names uh, really means that essentially he hasn't really totally changed. There's still some of the old Jacob in him, even though he's now supposed to be Israel. And so that really kind of represents that ambivalence. And then after that, most of the rest of that chapter is just kind of a long list of all the people that came down, all the sons of his 12 sons, essentially. We don't really need to read all that. But one thing I thought was kind of interesting, if you look at verse 21, and here they list the sons of Benjamin, because you get the impression reading the story, Benjamin's this little kid, and his father can't let him go because something might happen to him. Poor little Benji, he can't leave his father and be off by himself. But if you look at verse 21, Benjamin has 10 sons of his own. So, the reason for not sending him was not that he was too young or he was too weak or whatever. It's just, I think it seems to be basically that it's all that Jacob has left of Rachel. Rachel
Oh,
died.
okay.
And then that's the last thing he has. Rachel's the one real true love of his life. She dies in childbirth, giving birth to Benjamin. He thinks that for years he's thought that Joseph was dead, killed by some wild beast in the field. And now he thinks he might lose Benjamin. And that's the last tie that he has to Rachel. So even though Benjamin, is obviously a grown man with a bunch of sons of his own, Jacob still talks of him like he's a little boy, basically.
Yeah. You know what also is when you look at the geography of the way they're traveling, where they came from
Mm,
in what is now Israel, traveling across the Sinai into Egypt proper, where the
mm,
Pharaoh was, and I assume that's somewhere near the Nile. Um,
yeah.
that was not a small trip, and the going through all that desert.
In those days it certainly wasn't. It was probably a good couple of weeks. When you think of
Oh,
they had flocks and herds, he has women and
yeah,
children with them. Yeah. You'd be lucky to make maybe 10, 15 miles in a day.
a
Yeah.
max, yeah.
Yeah. Um, then so the next where they pick up the story next is let's see is where finally Jacob meets Joseph again, um,
Hmm.
and this picks up with verse 27 here. Um,
27. Okay.
Yeah. Well, one thing actually, it's interesting. If you look at verse 26, it says
Hmm.
all this after this list of all the sons and grandsons, it says all the souls belonging to Jacob that came into Egypt, that came out of his loins, besides Jacob's sons' wives, all the souls were 66, so 66. And then you have Joseph and his wife and his two sons, Ephraim and Manasseh. So basically, you're starting off in Egypt with 70 people, which makes it hard to buy that number, when they do the census after the Exodus. Granted that it's 4 centuries later, the slavery is supposed to have lasted for 400 years in Egypt, but then you get this incredible number, of more than 2 million people, 70 people becoming 2 million, even in the space of 4 centuries. It's kind of mind-boggling number, really. You know. I mean, talk about being fruitful and multiplying. They really did. Um,
Am I right, Fred, in when we look at the way this is written today and think about most of it was really put into writing while they were exiles in Babylon, right?
exactly. Yeah,
So
we
you
think
had
that.
all
Yeah,
this time for these stories to get mishmushed uh,
That's a
together.
good word, mishmashed.
well, they are. Yeah, really. A modern editor, would, given the Bible as a manuscript, would probably cut out at least 10, 15% of it. There's a lot of the same story being told two or three times.
Yeah.
There's a lot of repetition, a lot of inconsistencies. Some things aren't in chronological order. And you wonder, why didn't the editors of the Bible, get all this shaped up? And one theory is, that basically the reason they wrote it in the first place is here they lost everything. They lost the temple, been destroyed. Jerusalem was no longer their city. they lost their country. They were in a foreign land. They didn't know if they'd ever come back. And the reason for writing the Bible, they were just desperate to save their culture and religion. And maybe the way
Hmm.
to do it was to write all this down so that it wouldn't be lost. So,
Hmm.
the overriding imperative would have been don't lose anything. Just put it all in, all the legends, all the traditions, all the stories. And it doesn't matter if you have several versions of the same story or one seems to be inconsistent with the other. Just get it all in. We can sort it all out later.
Sure. Well, in the same way, um, weren't the Levites charged with carrying these stories forward?
Not necessarily the Levites. I mean, they were basically, they were, served in the temple. They were
Hmm.
basically, the professional clergy in a sense. The Kohanim, the priests, and the Levites. But no, we don't. We really have no idea who the actual people were who wrote the Bible, who actually wrote it down.
Uh,
Um, and then when they came back from the Babylonian exile, for about 200 years, until the Greeks and Alexander arrived, they were a province of the Persian Empire, and that's kind of a black hole in Jewish history. We know almost nothing about what was going on, during those 2 centuries. But
hmm.
that's really when the Bible was being put in the form that we have it today
Uh-huh.
because by the time when the Greeks came, a few decades after the Middle East became Greek, they did the first translation of the Bible into Greek, the Septuagint Bible. So
Oh.
obviously, it was pretty much finished by the end of the Persian period, and we don't know almost nothing about that period. The only two books of the Bible that are really set during the Persian period, the Book of Esther and the Book of Daniel, but they're both set in the Persian court. They don't really say anything about what was going on, in Judea at the time.
Hmm.
So we really don't really have no idea who the guys were who really did the final editing and putting this together.
Hmm.
Um, let's see.
I
And
think
then, yeah, go
Michael's
ahead.
back with us.
Okay, yeah. The next, part of the story is obviously when he finally meets his father again. Um, and that starts with chapter 46, verse 28. Goes from verse 28 to the end of chapter 46. Michael, do you want to read that?
He
You
can
want to
hear us,
unmute
but
and read
I
that?
think he's muted.
Okay. Well, okay. So, Sue, you want to read chapter 20, verse 28 through to the end of the
Sure.
chapter?
He
Okay.
sent he sent Judah ahead of him to Joseph to point the way before him to Goshen. So when they came to the region of Goshen, Joseph ordered his chariot and went to Goshen to meet his father Israel. He presented himself to him, embracing him around the neck. He wept on his neck a good while. Then Israel said to Joseph, "Now I can die, having seen for myself that you are still alive." Then Joseph said to his brothers and to his father's household, "I will go up and tell the news to Pharaoh and say to him, 'My brothers and my father who were in the land of Canaan have come to me. They are shepherds and they have been breeders of livestock, and they have brought their flocks and herds and all that is theirs.' So when the Pharaoh summons you and asks, 'What is your occupation?' you shall say, 'Your servants have been breeders of livestock from the start until now, both we and our fathers, so that we may stay in the land of Goshen, for for all shepherds are abhorrent to the Egyptians.'"
And the land of Goshen is basically in the Nile Delta. It's the northernmost end of Egypt, which is, I suppose, one of the most fertile areas where you want to be. And when you first read it, it doesn't seem to make any sense. Why do you want to tell Pharaoh we're herdsmen? When the Egyptians don't, when the Egyptians don't like herdsmen. Um, um, oh, okay, I got your message, Michael. Okay. Um, the And so it's one explanation is that he wants them to be by themselves. He doesn't want them to assimilate with the Egyptians. So
Ah.
basically, if the Egyptians don't like herdsmen, it means they probably will let the Hebrews have their own place and not and not mix with them. It's the only explanation I've heard that seems to make sense. You know, or it may be that they saying, well, if you don't like herdsmen, your own people to be herdsmen, we're playing an important role then. We're doing a job that the Egyptians don't want to do. That may be a selling point in having them in Egypt.
Well, and the Egyptians had a very much of a caste system,
Hmm.
so that probably entered into it also. I can't imagine that herdsmen would be the top of the pyramid.
No, it's true. Yeah, there probably was maybe the most menial occupation. Or, you didn't do it unless you couldn't do anything else.
Yeah.
And so maybe the fact they hear all these Hebrews coming down and they want to be herdsmen. Great. Yeah. In fact, actually, a little later, Pharaoh mentions, if you guys are really that good, you can do my cattle. Um, it's really in there.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's starting with chapter 47. Here, Joseph brings his family basically to meet Pharaoh. And so that's really chapter 47, 1 through 12. John, if you
Okay.
want to read that.
Yes. So Joseph went in and told Pharaoh, my father and my brothers, with their flocks and herds and all that they possess, have come from the land of Canaan. They are now in the land of Goshen. And from among his brothers he took 5 men and presented them to Pharaoh. Pharaoh said to his brothers, what is your occupation? And they said to Pharaoh, your servants are shepherds as our fathers were. Then they said to Pharaoh, we have come to sojourn in the land, for there is no pasture for our servants' flocks, for the famine is severe in the land of Canaan. And now, please let your servants dwell in the land of Goshen. Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, your father and your brothers have come to you. The land of Egypt is before you. Settle your father and your brothers in the best of the land. Let them settle in the land of Goshen, and if you know any able men among them, put them in charge of my livestock.
Right? Yeah.
Then Joseph brought in Jacob his father and stood before Pharaoh. And Jacob blessed Pharaoh. And Pharaoh said to Jacob, how many are the days of the years of your life? And Jacob said to Pharaoh, the days of the years of my sojourning are 130 years. Few and evil have been the days of the years of my life, and they have not attained to the days of the years of the life of my fathers in their days of their sojourning. And Jacob blessed Pharaoh and went out from the presence of Pharaoh. Then Joseph settled his father and his brothers and gave them a possession in the land of Egypt, in the best of the land, in the land of Ramses. As Pharaoh had commanded, Joseph provided his father, his brothers, and all his father's household with food according to the number of their dependents.
Yeah. So basically, now that they're going to be settled in Egypt, um, let's see, they yeah, here. The interesting thing is, when he asked Jacob says, few and evil have been the days of the years of my life. Jacob's apparently not, he's saying, I haven't had a good life.
Yeah,
Well, he has had a good life. He gets it. But there's one interesting one of modern theologians written about this. Says if you think about it, everything that Jacob got in his life always had a downside. He starts off by getting the birthright, but to do that, he has to cheat his father. He has to make his brother Esau hate him. He has to exile himself from home for years. He gets to marry Rachel, who he loves, but he has to take on Leah, who he doesn't love, in order to do that. Then he loses Rachel in birth, when their kids are still very young. And then again, he loses control of his family. His sons, Shimon and Levi, after their sister Dinah is raped, massacre the whole town of Shechem, without saying anything to him or getting his permission. And then he has all these years of mourning Joseph when he thinks that Joseph is dead. Uh, so yeah, basically, the way he looks at it is, the glass is half empty, not half full.
Yeah, yeah.
He's a pessimist.
This constant reference to sojourning, would that mean that
Mhm.
they were nomadic?
Yeah, I mean, it's not their land. I mean, despite the fact that they've lived there, for 3 generations already, from Abraham to Jacob, it's still not really their land. They're living in other people's land. When the only land they really own, is when Sarah dies and Abraham goes to the Hittites, who's living among, and
Mhm.
purchases that field, the cave of Machpelah, in the field in Hebron, to bury Sarah. That's the first time he actually owns a piece of land, in Canaan. But the rest of it, they're just living in someone else's land, whether it's the Philistines or the Hittites or the other peoples there. They don't really take possession of it as theirs till Joshua, essentially.
So then this is really the first time they've had any settled land that they could stay on without
Well, in a sense, yeah.
moving
Well,
around.
I guess you could say it's their land, but again, it still belongs to Pharaoh. Basically, it's
Yeah,
still part of
everything
Egypt.
belonged to Pharaoh.
Yeah, it's sort of like, Pharaoh's giving them a lease on the land, but
Yeah.
it's still not really their land even then. Of course, the
Want me
other
to
thing,
continue?
that one question that really comes up with this, they're coming down in the second year of the famine. There's still 5 years of famine to go, but after those 5 years were over, why didn't they go back to Canaan?
Yeah.
Why did they hang around and then eventually get put into slavery when a new pharaoh comes to power? The usual answer that's given is, well, it was God's will. Just as it was God's will for Joseph to go down into Egypt, to eventually save his family during the famine. God tells Abraham, way back, as your descendants will be slaves for 400 years in a land that's not their own, and then they'll come back here to take possession of the land. So again, they could very well have gone back to Canaan after in 5 more years when the famine was over, but they don't. They stay settled there, and then they're eventually enslaved. Then the last part of this really, which is kind of a nasty part, starts with let's see, yeah, with verse 14, with the way
Okay.
Joseph now treats the Egyptians, which is something we don't dwell on much, but it's interesting. We always talk about how the Egyptians enslaved the Hebrews. Well, here actually is how Joseph enslaves the Egyptians. Starting with verse 14. Well,
Okay.
let's see whose turn is it to read. Sue, you want to read that?
Sure. Joseph gathered in all the money that was to be found in the land of Egypt and in the land of Canaan as payments for the rations that were being procured. And Joseph brought the money to Pharaoh's palace. And when the money gave out in the land of Egypt and in the land of Canaan, all the Egyptians came to Joseph and said, "Give us bread, lest we die before your very eyes, for the money is gone." And Joseph said, "Bring your livestock, and I will sell to you against your livestock if the money is gone." So they brought their livestock to Joseph, and Joseph gave them bread in exchange for their horses, for the stocks of sheep and cattle and the asses. Thus he provided them with bread that year in exchange for their livestock. When the year was ended, they came to again and said to him, "We cannot hide from my lord that all the money in the animal stocks consigned to my lord, nothing is left at my lord's disposal save our persons and our farmland. Let us not perish before your eyes, both we and our land. Take us and our land in exchange for bread, and we will be with our land, will be serfs to the Pharaoh. Provide the seed that we may live and not die, and that the land may not become a waste." So Joseph gained possession of all the farmland of Egypt for the Pharaoh, every Egyptian having sold his field because the famine was too much for them. Thus the land passed over to Pharaoh, and he removed the population town by town from one end of Egyptian's border to the other. Only the land of the priests he did not take over, for the priests had an allotment for Pharaoh, and they lived off the allotment which Pharaoh had made to them, and therefore they did not sell their land. Then Joseph said to the people, when I have this day acquired you and your land for Pharaoh, here is your seed for you to sow the land. And when the harvest comes, you will give 1/5 to Pharaoh, and 4/5 shall be yours, and seed as seed for the fields, and as food for you and those in your household, and as nourishment for your children. And they said, you have saved our lives. We are grateful to my Lord, and we shall be serfs to Pharaoh. And Joseph made it into a land law in Egypt, which is still valid, that a fifth shall be the Pharaoh's. Only the land of the priests did not become the Pharaoh's. Thus Israel settled in the country of Egypt, in the region of Goshen, and they acquired holdings in it and were fertile and increased greatly.
Here, basically, Joseph has enslaved the Egyptian people,
Hmm.
which, you think about that. Who grew all the surplus grain that he's selling back to them? If you assume it's the farmers of Egypt, it's their grain. Who you think he was storing it up to give it back to them, during the years of the famine, but instead he's selling it back to them. And so they've exhausted all their money, they've exhausted everything all their assets they can give him, and they finally end up as tenant farmers, essentially. And with Pharaoh owning all their land, he reduced them to serfdom. And so, what one modern commentator has said, well, when you talk about the slavery of the Hebrews, basically what goes around comes around. You Joseph enslaves the Egyptians, Pharaoh, and then enslaves the Hebrews.
Well, it's interesting here on verse 26, it says, so Joseph made it a statute
Mhm.
concerning the land of Egypt
Yeah.
as it stands to this day.
And apparently that was the situation in Egypt. The Pharaoh actually owned the land. It was literally his personal land. Everybody living on it essentially was his servant. But again, in the Egyptian religion, Pharaoh was a god,
Right.
and the priests constantly taught the people that. And the priests, had ceremonies where they honored him as a god, and his power depended on that. So the only group of people who were not affected by this, who kept getting their regular grain ration, were the priests. Pharaoh did not want to disturb them. He left them alone, and everybody else got reduced to being tenant farmers. So, and the story continues. Let's see, we'll just go to chapter 48. This is kind of an interesting story
Okay.
where Jacob is coming toward the end of his life. And it's interesting what he does now with Joseph. Somebody want to read chapter
Sure.
48.
After this, Joseph was told, behold, your father is ill. So he took with him his two sons, Manasseh and Ephraim. And it was told to Jacob, your son Joseph has come to you. Then Israel summoned his strength and sat up in bed. And Jacob said to Joseph, God Almighty appeared to me at Luz in the land of Canaan and blessed me, and said to me, behold, I will make you fruitful and multiply you. I will make of you a company of peoples, and will give this land to your offspring after you for every everlasting possession. And now your two sons, who were born to you in the land of Egypt, before I came to you in Egypt, are mine. Ephraim and Manasseh shall be mine, as Reuben and Simon are. And the children that you fathered after them shall be yours. Then they shall be called by the name of their brothers in their inheritance. As for me, when I came from Paddan to my sorrow. Rachel died in the land of Canaan on the way, when there was still some distance to go to Ephrath. And I buried her there on the way to Ephrath, that is Bethlehem. When Israel saw Joseph's sons, he said, "Who are these?" Joseph said of his father, "They are my sons whom God had given me here." And he said, "Bring them to me, please, that I may bless them." Now the eyes of Israel were dim with age, so that he could not see. So Joseph brought them near him, and he kissed them and embraced them. And Israel said to Joseph, "I never expected to see your face, and behold, God has let me see your offspring also." So then Joseph removed them from his knees, and he bowed himself with his face to the earth. And Joseph took them both, Ephraim in his right hand toward Israel's left hand, and Manasseh in his left hand toward Israel's right hand, and brought them near him. And Israel stretched out his right hand and laid it on the head of Ephraim, who was the younger, and on his left hand on the head of Manasseh, crossing his hands, for Manasseh was the firstborn. And he blessed Joseph and said, "The God before whom my fathers Abraham and Isaac walked, the God who has been my shepherd all my life long to this day, the angel who has redeemed me from all evil, bless the boys, and in them let my name be carried on, and the name of my fathers Abraham and Isaac, and let them grow into a multitude in the midst of the earth." When Joseph saw that his father laid his right hand on the head of Ephraim, it displeased him, and he took his father's hand to move it from Ephraim's head to Manasseh's head. And Joseph said to his father, "Not this way, my father, since this one is the firstborn. Put your right hand on his head." But his father refused and said, "I know, my son, I know. He also shall become a people, and he also shall be great. Nevertheless, his younger brother shall be greater than he, and his offspring shall become a multitude of nations." So he blessed them that day, saying, "By you Israel will pronounce blessings, saying, God make you as Ephraim and as Manasseh." Thus he put Ephraim before Manasseh. Then Israel said to Joseph, "Behold, I am about to die, but God will be with you and will bring you again to the land of your fathers. Moreover, I have given to you rather than to your brothers one mountain slope that I took from the hand of the Amorites with my sword and with my bow."
So basically, here Joseph is bringing his two sons to be blessed. And what Jacob actually does is adopt them. He actually adopts his grandsons as his own sons. Like you said, they're going to have the same status as Reuben and Simeon do. And so that, which is why you don't have a tribe of Joseph. You have tribes of Manasseh and Ephraim later on, which actually, brings the number of tribes up to 13 rather than 12. And we talk about the 12 tribes of Israel, but they're actually really 13 because Joseph becomes two tribes. Although when they divide the land up, it's really still 12 because the tribe of Levi, the Levites, don't get land of their own. They're scattered across the land. They're not given their own holding of land. But then when it comes time to bless them, Manasseh is the older one and Ephraim's the younger one. And so, you put your right hand on the hand of the firstborn, but Jacob crosses his hands. And again, it's a tradition of the Bible. It's always the younger son that seems to get it. Ishmael's Abraham's firstborn. Isaac gets the blessing. Esau is Isaac's firstborn. Jacob gets the blessing. Reuben's um, Jacob's firstborn, but actually it's Judah who eventually, carries the tradition on. David is the youngest of, I think, seven kids. He's the seventh son of Jesse. All through the Bible, they always keep saying how important the firstborn is, and yet actually the firstborn never gets it.
He gets cut out. Yeah.
He always gets cut out. Um, but in fact, it becomes actually a tradition in Orthodox homes. There's a tradition on Friday nights before the Friday night Sabbath meal. The father blesses the children, and it's traditional to bless the boys by saying, "May God make you like Ephraim and Manasseh." For the girls, you say, "May God make you like Leah and Rachel." But the tradition comes from this story here. And then the next chapter, yeah, go ahead.
Fred, he blessed Joseph's sons like his
Mhm.
own. I don't
Yeah,
understand that because
I
they're
don't
they're
really
his
either.
grandsons.
Hmm Yeah, I don't understand that really either. Why he just, there shouldn't just be a tribe of Joseph. Why
Yeah,
Joseph's sons are set apart. When there are all these other sons that all Jacob's, Jacob has, a couple of dozen grandchildren already at this
yes.
point. And it's never really explained. There's no real good explanation why he singles out Ephraim and Manasseh, for this kind of special treatment. We don't really know.
Although there is the reference that he had that slice of land.
Yeah,
It,
and that's another verse that nobody understands because it says that I'm giving you this extra inheritance, this extra piece of land, which I took from the Amorite, which is another name for the Canaanites, with my sword and my bow. And there's nothing in the story of Jacob's life that says anything about that. That just kind of comes out of left field, you know. And most of the commentators just kind of just throw up their hands at that. There's no good explanation for this verse. And Jacob's the last kind of guy you'd expect to be a warrior, he's to win anything with his sword and his bow. And so
yeah.
that's just one of these verses nobody really has a good explanation for. And then with chapter 49, he concludes the book of Genesis. And what he basically does, he gathers his sons and in a sense, this is his last will and testament. In a sense, he sort of predicts the future for each of his sons. And he starts with the oldest, Reuben, and goes down, to going down to the youngest. Um, he says in verse 2, assemble yourselves and hear, you sons of Jacob, and hearken to Israel your father. And he starts off with Reuben, saying, Reuben, you're my firstborn, my might, the first fruit of my strength, the excellency of dignity, the excellency of power. But then with verse 4, he comes down on it, unstable as water. You had not the excellency. And then also, because you went up to your father's bed and defiled it. I remember there's earlier on, Reuben had actually slept. I forget whether it's Bilhah or the other handmaid, one of the two concubines. But Reuben sleeps with one of them, and his father never forgives him for it. And so here he's not going to be a leader in Israel. And then he goes to the next two sons, Simeon and Levi, and pretty much almost curses them. He says, Simeon and Levi are brethren, weapons of violence are their kinship. What he's talking about here is the massacre at Shechem. After his sister Dina is raped, they take their vengeance by slaughtering all the men of Shechem without even consulting with their father about it. And so he says, let my soul not come into their council, unto their assembly let my glory not be united. For in their anger they slew men, in their self-will they huffed oxen. Cursed be their anger, for it was fierce, and their wrath, for it was cruel. And I will divide them in Jacob and scatter them in Israel. And which is what really happened. The tribe of Levi, in a sense, was scattered in Israel, even though they do get the honor of presiding in the temple and the sanctuary. They're the only tribe that doesn't have land of their own, and they're really dependent on the charity of the other tribes. The offerings they bring for their food. So, and then the tribe of Simeon, for some reason, just faded away with time. It got very small and was eventually absorbed into the tribe of Judah. So this actually came true for both these tribes. And then when he gets to Judah, his fourth son, this is the one who he really praises. Here he's setting Judah up, to be the royal house of Israel. Says Judah, these shall your brethren praise. Your hand shall be on the neck of your enemies. Your father's son shall bow down before thee. Um, Judah is the lion's whelp. From the prey, my son, thou art gone up. He stooped down, he crouched as a lion, and as a lioness, who shall rouse him up? And this is significant in that the lion became the symbol of Judah. And we talk about rulers being lions of Judah. It comes here, Judah's compared to a lion. Um, and then the scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet, as long as men come to Shiloh. Unto him shall the obedience of the people be. So essentially, he's really anointing Judah as the future royal house, the tribe of Judah, as the ruling house of Israel. Um, and then they go on with the other sons. Verse 13 is Zebulun. Um, verse 16, Dan. Um, verse 18, this is one of the odd things about the Bible. Verse 18, he suddenly cuts in here and says, I wait for thy salvation, O Lord. And again, it's not clear why that verse is there, just kind of stuck in the middle of it there with no explanation. But then he goes on with verse 19, God, and then verse 20, Asher. But then, even though uh, Manasseh and Ephraim are going to be tribes, here he doesn't talk about them directly. He talks about Joseph, starting with verse 22, and he really praises Joseph. He's the only other one of his sons who he really heaps all this praise on, Judah and Joseph. But Joseph is a fruitful vine by a fountain. Its branches run over the wall. The archers have dealt bitterly with him and shot at him and hated him, but his bow abode firm, and his arms were made strong by the hands of the mighty one of Jacob. From the shepherd, the stone of Israel. And here the poetry is really kind of dense here. It's kind of hard to translate exactly. Uh, but he goes on, even by the God of thy father who shall help thee, and by the Almighty who shall bless thee, with blessings of heaven above, blessings of the deep that crouches beneath, blessings of the breast and the womb. The blessing of thy father, you are mighty beyond the blessings of my progenitors, unto the utmost bound of the everlasting hill. They shall be upon the head of Joseph, and upon the crown of the head of the prince among his brethren. So he's really set up kind of a paradox here, in that two of his sons have really been designated as possible rulers here. And actually, that's what really happened later on. After the death of Solomon, the kingdom split up into two kingdoms. The southern kingdom of Judah with the tribe of Benjamin with it, and the 10 northern tribes. And they were led by the tribe of Ephraim, which led the revolt. This one of the sons of Joseph. The first king of the northern kingdom was Jeroboam, the tribal leader of Ephraim. And so this, in a sense, is a foreshadowing of a later splitting into two kingdoms. Two of his sons are really honored as if they're going to be future rulers. Okay. And then basically they go on with the death of Jacob. If you go on to uh, well, actually the last verse of chapter 49, verse 33 on chapter 49. And when Jacob had made an end of charging his sons, he gathered up his feet into the bed and expired and was gathered unto his people. And with chapter 50, Joseph fell upon his father's face and wept upon him and kissed him. Um, and Joseph commanded his servants, the physicians, to embalm his father, and the physicians embalmed Israel. And then again, he goes back up, you know, to Canaan, actually temporarily to bury his father. You know, the traditional burial place where Abraham and Sarah and Isaac and Rebekah are buried is Hebron. You know, the field that Abraham bought, the cave of Machpelah. And so uh, uh, Jo- um, Joseph is going to take his father back to Hebron, bury him there, and then return to Egypt.
Can we pick that up next week? It's 6:30.
You know, I think it really is kind of the end of the story at this point.
Okay. So
Um,
we're up to chapter 50.
Essentially, yeah, if you look at chapter 50, right toward the end, let's see. Yeah, it's interesting. If you look at verse 16 on chapter 50, which kind of winds up Joseph's life, it's kind of interesting. Well, actually, go back to verse 15. When Joseph's brethren saw that their father was dead, they said, "It may be that Joseph will hate us and fully requite us of all the evil which we did unto him." So after all these years, the brothers are still not really
Still
sure
concerned.
about how
Yeah.
Joseph feels about them. They're probably thinking maybe he's not going to do anything to us while our father's still alive. But now that our father is dead, you know, maybe he hasn't gotten all his revenge yet. And they sent a message to Joseph saying, "Thy father did command before he died, saying, So shall you say unto Joseph, Forgive, I pray thee now the transgression of thy brethren and their sin, for they did unto the evil. And now we pray thee, forgive the transgressions of the servants of the God of thy father." And Joseph wept when they spoke unto him. And his brethren also went and fell down before him, and they said, "Behold, we are your slaves." And Joseph said unto them, "Fear not, for am I in the place of God? And as for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, to bring it to pass, as it is this day, to save our people alive. And now fear not, I will sustain you and your little ones." And he comforted them and spoke kindly unto them. And Joseph dwelt in Egypt, he and his father's house. And Joseph lived 110 years. And Joseph saw Ephraim's children of the third generation, and the children of Machir, the son of Manasseh, were also on Joseph's knees. And Joseph said unto his brethren, "I die, but God will surely remember you and bring you up out of this land and to the land which he swore to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob." And Joseph took an oath of the children of Israel, saying, "God will surely remember you, and you shall carry my bones up from here." And so Joseph died being 110 years old, and they embalmed him, and he was put in a coffin in Egypt, which really ends the story of the patriarchs.
Yeah.
You know, and then you go next into Exodus, which begins the story of Moses and the Exodus.
So we'll start that next week.
And, well, actually, I won't be here next week. Uh,
Okay.
I'll be I'll be down in Florida visiting one of my cousins down there.
Oh,
So
well, you
Oh,
have
yeah,
a wonderful trip and a
have a
safe
yeah.
trip.
terrific trip, Fred.
Okay.
So we will be
So
back again.
The first
in
Tuesday in
two
January.
weeks, yeah, we'll be back
Um,
in 2 weeks. Yeah, I
what's
guess
the date?
it'll be. Let me look at my calendar. The back
It'll
on
be the 6th of January.
yeah the first Tuesday of of January, which will be the 6th of January.
Six
That's
of
the
That'll
next,
be the
January.
next
that's
class.
the next
Great.
Yeah,
meeting?
yeah.
Okay,
And we'll begin the book of Exodus then.
All right. Great. Thank you,
okay, good.
Fred.
Have a terrific time, Fred.
Okay.
Good
Have
for
a
And you,
you.
yeah,
great time and a safe
okay,
trip, and
right,
should you have a safe New Year's.
right. Yeah, you guys
Yeah,
all have a happy New Year.
Yep.
We'll
healthy
see
and
Happy
when
New
you're
happy
back.
one, everybody. See you
Yep.
in 2
Okay.
weeks.
Have a good trip.
Okay. Yeah, see you.